So you've taken some time to look at your character's race, class, and background. Now it's time to put some pen to paper and do a little basic arithmetic. Hi, my name is Ian and welcome to D&D Cram School, the show where we break down the important things you'll need to know in order to play 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. In today's video, we're going to be going over your character's 6 ability scores and how they underlie the game's mechanics and storytelling in 5th edition. So let's get into it. Every creature in D&D has 6 ability scores which measure their abilities. These scores are Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. Every time your character attempts something that the DM determines has a chance of success or failure, they will likely ask you to roll a d20 and add the relevant ability score modifier to determine the result. For example, if your character is trying to recall information about a town, the DM will probably ask for an intelligence check, which is a d20 roll plus the intelligence modifier to determine if you can remember anything. This would be different than trying to persuade a noble into taking action on your behalf, which would use charisma instead. Because of this, your character's 6 ability scores will determine how likely they are to succeed when making any of these attempts. So how will these scores affect your character at the table? Starting off, Strength measures your character's physical power. It determines your character's athleticism, carrying capacity, and ability to wield melee weapons. It also determines prerequisites which your character needs to meet in order to move normally in heavy armor. Next, Dexterity measures your character's agility and grace. It determines your character's acrobatics, stealthiness, initiative modifier, and their ability to use ranged weapons. Your Dexterity modifier can also affect your character's armor class if they're wearing non-heavy armor, or it can work well with some melee weapons instead of the Strength ability score. Constitution measures your character's toughness and resilience. It is used to determine your character's hit points, which is the amount of damage that they can take without becoming incapacitated. It also helps to fight off poison and disease, as well as some spells which they might be under the effects of. Intelligence measures your character's deduction ability and their knowledge. In TTRPGs, there's an acknowledged separation between player knowledge and character knowledge. Intelligence checks are used to determine what kind of information your character would be privy to versus what you as the player might know already. This can also help your character make informed decisions at critical moments. This is the primary stat of wizards and artificers and is used for their spellcasting ability. Wisdom measures your character's intuition and senses. It governs your character's perception, which is often the most called for check at the table, as well as insight, which determines how well they can understand the body language of other characters and the tone in which they are speaking. Wisdom is also the casting stat for clerics, druids, and rangers. Lastly, we have Charisma, which measures your character's speaking ability and sense of self. Charisma is used when you're trying to influence another character in the game, such as through intimidation, persuasion, and deception. It is also the spellcasting stat for bards, warlocks, sorcerers, and paladins. As you might have guessed by now, not all ability scores are created equal. Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom are often more helpful than Strength or Intelligence for classes that don't specifically call for those. Because Strength is often used for weapon attacks, classes like Wizards and Sorcerers can safely make this one their lowest stat. So now that we understand what the 6 ability scores mean, which numbers are we going to be using in our character? For this, you'll have to consult your DM. Individual DMs have different preferences on how they want their players to generate these 6 ability scores. Personally, I prefer standard array or point buy as a method. However, some DMs will have you roll randomly or use a custom array instead. However you generate these scores, it's important not to mix up ability scores with ability score modifiers. The ability score is written in this little bubble over here, while the modifier is written in the bigger box to show that it's used more often. To figure out what an ability score's modifier is, just subtract 10 from the score, divide it by 2, and round it down. For example, a strength score of 14 is going to have a +2 for its modifier, whereas wisdom at 8 is going to have a -1. Therefore, the modifier increases whenever the ability score reaches an even number. There's also a table on page 13 of the player's handbook, just in case this gets a little confusing. Next, we're going to be using our ability score modifiers to fill in a few sections of our character sheet. We already reviewed our character sheet in episode 2, but here we're going to get a little bit more specific. First, we're going to be filling in your character's proficiency bonus, which you can find on any class's leveling table. In episode 2, we mentioned that whenever you see a racial trait, class feature, or background grant a saving throw or skill proficiency, that you should bubble it in. Next, we're going to move on to our modifiers. We're going to move our modifiers over to fill in these two sections here. However, whatever is being bubbled is also going to get your proficiency bonus added to the ability score modifier. For example, we have a first level cleric with proficiency in wisdom and charisma saving throws. So we're going to be adding the proficiency bonus as well as the respective modifier to these bubbles here. But because clerics aren't proficient in dexterity saving throws, we're just going to be adding the ability modifier. Next to each skill, you'll find a faded ability which will tell you which modifier to add to which skill. And the math here is the same as with saving throws. Remember when we talked about passive perception? Once you figure out the perception modifier, just add 10 to that, and that will be your passive perception. This is the score that non-player characters will have to meet or beat in order to sneak around you using the stealth skill. You may have also gotten other proficiencies with your class, such as weapons, armor, tools, gaming sets, vehicles, or languages. Those can be noted down here in other proficiencies. As we move across the character sheet, our character's initiative bonus is equal to our dexterity modifier. Some players out there might wonder why there's a separate box if it's just the same as your dexterity modifier, but this is because there are other features or abilities that can affect your initiative. For example, the alert feat in the player's handbook will increase your initiative by 5, and the Gloomstalker Ranger and War Wizard from Xanathar's Guide to Everything will also allow you to add your wisdom or intelligence modifiers respectively to this score. While these examples aren't common, it does warrant the initiative having its own location on the character sheet. The last section that we can fill in before choosing our equipment is calculating our hit points. Our class determines both our starting hit points and the progression of our hit points as we level up. This is something we'll be adding our Constitution modifier to, and it makes it so that Constitution is a good secondary or tertiary score. Using our first level cleric as an example, clerics have an 8 plus Constitution modifier to start for their hit points. And let's say that we made Constitution our secondary score with a standard array, which gives a +2 to the bonus. Therefore, our first level cleric would have 10 hit points. Each time they level up, and assuming the DM wants you to use the average roll, this cleric will gain an additional 7 hit points per level. However, Constitution will also increase over time if you invest in it, which means that your hit points will not only increase for future levels, but you will retroactively gain hit points. So, you'll need to make sure that you add that extra bonus whenever you level up your Constitution. With all these sections filled in, the last major choice that we need to cover in depth is equipment. If you have any questions about what we went over today, feel free to leave a comment and we'll get to it as soon as we can. Remember to like and subscribe for some more easy tips for your tabletop adventures. Have an awesome day, everyone, and we'll catch you guys next time.